Welcome back to Halftime Report. Time for an exclusive chat now. Macquarie Asset Management, the largest infrastructure investor in the world with an AUM size of $600 billion, has invested in 60-plus assets in India at present, which span across sectors. Prashant Nair caught up with Ben Way, the group head of Macquarie Asset Management, and discussed about their India investing journey. He began by asking about the key lessons learned from their investing journey in the country. Listen into a slice of that conversation.
Some of the lessons we've learned are, really important to have local partnerships and people on the ground who can really navigate relationships, regulation, and understand from a bottom-up point of view what the right sectors are to invest. I think the second thing is, patience and tenacity. India is not a linear style market. It has cycles. It's constantly evolving, and so you've got to really demonstrate that you understand the market there and you're there for the long term. I think thirdly, we've learned a lot of things along the way because the market's evolved, and any good investor is always evolving with the market. So originally when we came into the market, we did a lot of joint ventures or we took minority positions. And as we grew and understood the market more, we moved into more majority control positions where we can really bring our global expertise and capital and match it with the opportunity here in India. So we're incredibly positive given the macro and secular tailwinds in India about investing here and really looking to build on the experience we've had to date.
From a listed universe perspective, when we talk about infrastructure, it's largely power, roads, highways, that kind of thing. But tell us, which are the areas you are most bullish about from the infrastructure space from an investment point of view?
Well, I think the big global thematics that I think people are really focused on at the moment have to either do with energy transition or to do with transport or to do with digitalization. And I think those big global thematics are reflected as the biggest thematics here in India. And certainly our experience has been that those sorts of thematics are generally the building blocks of nation building and of economies and really creating inclusive growing economies. And so I think when we think about India, we too still think about roads and airports. We think about energy, both traditional but increasingly around energy transition. And energy transition is it's a broad universe, everything from core renewables like wind or solar right through to battery storage, green ammonia, green hydrogen. So we see a huge potential there. And it's really amazing, to be honest, what India is doing around energy transition. And I don't think it gets enough credit for the strides it's making. And then lastly, obviously, things like digitalization. And one of the biggest thematics for us has been things like data centers. We're one of the largest owners and operators of data centers around the world. We have more than 9 platforms today covering geographies from Asia Pacific through to Europe into the Americas. And we see that as a real opportunity here as well. So I think, India, because of its population size, because of the robust growth of the economy, and because of a very supportive policy backdrop, means that those global thematics are here, but in many ways, they're here turbocharged.
With regards to data centers, any projections you have? Because, I think in terms of data center capacity, it's pretty small. I think about 1,500, 1,700 megawatts, but there's room to grow. Could you give us a sense of what your expectations are from that space for India?
Yeah, so every data center projection we've ever made, we've got wrong. And that's because a little bit like smartphones 20 years ago, I think everyone struggled to frame just the revolution of the smartphone and convergence. And I think we're doing the same thing here with data centers. So I don't know exactly how big data centers is going to be here in India. What I do know is that the growth will be sort of many-fold over many years to come. And that's just driven by the underlying digitalization, obviously, of the economy, but also things like AI that are generating a big drive. And the thing that I sort of reflect on is, I think India is at a really interesting point in terms of where you see that crossover between urbanization and innovation and entrepreneurialism, and that's going to create a whole range of new businesses. And a lot of those businesses are obviously going to have digital at their center, And what they'll need is more data capacity, they'll need more cloud capacity, and they'll want to embrace AI. And so I think when you look at a market like India and you take the population and where it is in terms of its growth curve and its urbanization, you can see that data centers here will be a long-term and very significant opportunity. So you're right, it is relatively nascent compared to other markets in the world, but like we've seen in other sectors in India, it's picking up quickly. And just as this economy will soon be the third largest economy in the world, it will clearly be a big consumer of data and will need a lot more data center capacity than it has today.
Ben, are you sort of public market investors or primarily private market investors?
So we have three real areas we focus on across the $650 billion of assets we manage today on behalf of our clients. About $250 billion of that is in private markets, principally in things like infrastructure and energy transition. The other 400 is split between credit, which is really public, levered and private credit. And then the remainder 200 is in public equities. And our public equities business is principally based in the US and Australia and looks at all different types of listed equities, large cap, small cap, emerging markets, growth, tech, those sorts of things. So we do have a broad array of exposure to the equity markets around the world.
Any asks from the government, since the government, of course, is a very big player with policy decisions, etc., in the infrastructure space?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. One of the things that I spend a lot of my time on is speaking with clients, and I'd say the number one issue around the world with institutional clients in particular has been around geopolitics, and a lot of that is focused on the stability and transparency of government policy and how impactful that can be around the world. And we've seen that in markets like the US, where we've had the IRA, which has been one of the most profound industrial pieces of policy for decades, and how much that's done to stimulate investment in infrastructure and energy transition. And so I think that's a good example of the impact that government can have in terms of helping stimulate and drive investment and create confidence and momentum. And I think the Indian government has done an excellent job, particularly over the current administration's time, in terms of making this market more transparent, making it more liquid. We've got good balance sheets at a government, bank and corporate level. And so I think all we would ask is that the government focus on continuing to make business easier to do. And that means, the government obviously has an important role to play and it's a much more difficult thing to be a government than it is to run a business. But making business easier to do, making it more transparent, reducing red tape, being very clear on areas of policy and helping support that investment is, I think, always a way to create confidence and to attract, what is a finite amount of global capital.